I'm Matt Valley. Welcome to the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the insights and strategies pros that you trust. Today's guest is Michael Schonfeld, who is Senior Strategist at FCB, the agency out of New York, known as Foot Cone Belding, part of the Interpublic Group. And fun fact for you here, FCB has been around for almost 150 years. And actually, it's the third oldest continuously operating ad agency in the US. So there you go. But lest you think that makes them stodgy, of course they're not. In fact, they were named Adweek's 2020 Global Agency of the Year. That's it, which is quite notable because that's the year of the pandemic. So good on you. So it's good stuff. Now, I met Michael on the Medium platform because of some really cool stuff that he had written. And I wanted to learn more about it. So I reached out to him and I discovered this really cool backstory about how he got into brand strategy position, life, working on the agency side. And it's really cool. And I'm super happy to have you here telling us about it today, Michael. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Now I have to apologize because we just did this interview. So this is the second time around, but I forgot to hit record. So that's the perils of having a podcast on Zoom. So there you go. So thanks for sticking with me here, Michael. I really appreciate it. So let's do it, man. Let's get into it. So let's hear a little bit about how you got into the agency world working in strategy.
Absolutely. I wasn't sure if you were going to mention that this was a take two. I'm trying to remember all of the, jokes and asides that I said. I'm trying to remember the good stuff. Get rid of the bad stuff.
That's right. All right.
I'll do my best. All that is to say, I work at FCB New York, as Matt mentioned, on the strategy team. And for folks who I guess aren't as familiar with brand strategy work, it's a lovely sort of amalgam of consumer psychology, I guess like understanding of culture at large, maybe like cultural anthropology, if I really want to pat myself on the back and pretend that I'm super smart. And then just kind of helping to inspire the creative team using audience insights, using consumer insights to then like, I guess, build out creative work that truly matches our audience and what will resonate with our audience and build relevance with them most deeply. So I've been at FCB only for a few months, so I was not there for all of those lovely awards that you mentioned. But the shiny trophies definitely did attract me to the building. I'm not gonna lie to you. And so I guess then to rewind and kind of I forget what movie this is from, but it's like, hey, you probably want to know how I got here, huh? It might have been, is that from the 80s or the 90s? I don't even remember.
I have no idea, but we'll go with it. All
right. I might even be making this up. If anybody wants to write this screenplay, go ahead. I'm sure there's a listener right now who is like in their car being like, it's this movie. Just say the name. It's this.
Because that's somebody crazy right now.
I know. Anyways, I got here into this lovely chair and onto this podcast. Really, I guess I can start my brand strategy journey, or I can trace it back to college. As many folks who've gone on this podcast are musically inclined, I am as well. I both write music and I used to actually work in the industry when I was much younger. And at the time when I was in college, was namely pretty deep in hip hop, both just as a fan and as a total nerd, hip hop nerd. But then also in terms of, I guess, like working in the industry. And I happened to be working at a label in which I had an experience that oddly enough made me realize I didn't want to work in music. And while I may have been a little bummed out for a few weeks after that experience, it kind of set me on this path where I had taken, I guess, what I learned from my job and then applied it to marketing, where I was taking marketing classes in college. And I was very interested in sort of the implicit associations that we make with different brands. So whether it's, right, I think of McDonald's and I think of Golden Arches, or I think of, I'm loving it. I was particularly, I guess, just in my own spare time, intrigued by how like rappers would drop references to specific brands. And I
Right.
don't know, for example, Big Sean had a line where he said, there's a million people behind me and I'm not talking Verizon.
Right.
An homage to that old Verizon ad where I guess like the now Sprint guy, but former Verizon guy, had like a bunch of people. Uh, and so I was just so curious as to how people would kind of arrive at those quick assumptions and how they would kind of connect those dots so quickly, and what it would take to make them connect those dots. What creatively, whether it's the jingle that you use, whether it's like a specific tagline that you use, whether it's a lifestyle that you embed yourself in.
Right.
Um, and so I guess kind of stuck with that then after I graduated college, and really got my foundational strategy experience writing creative briefs, developing sort of like campaign rollouts. So maybe a little bit more of like communications planning. That's like the technical term. So that's not just like the consumer insight, but it's like really understanding the media on which it runs and how you can tailor your creative to match that media.
Right.
Uh, so I did that across a number of brands at BBDO, another sort of original advertising institution. Mad Men was written about it.
Yep.
I did not wear a suit, nor did I smoke any cigarettes or drink whiskey. But it was, I nonetheless felt like I was in a true advertising institution there. And I got to work on a lot of great campaigns for M&M's, Snickers, Twix, a lot of really fun, Super Bowl campaign stuff that like when you're just starting out, your eyes are just wide and you're just so excited to be there.
Yeah.
I got to do a lot of cause-oriented stuff too, namely working on a lot of anti-gun violence work with Sandy Hook Promise, which is an organization founded by the parents of children who were killed in the Newtown school shooting, which was incredibly powerful to work on. And so having, I guess, that breadth of, on the one hand, selling candy, and on the other hand, speaking to like such poignant, deep-seated issues in society, I think it really gave me such a versatile experience that I've then gone on to, I guess, appreciate strategy from a number of angles. At the job before FCB, sorry to really give you an elaborate timeline here.
That's good.
I was working on Reebok, really heading up a lot of the strategy work for them. I did not work at Reebok, to clarify. I just worked at an agency that worked with Reebok.
Right.
And I'm also pretty into, I guess, like menswear, streetwear, sneakers to some extent. And so working on that was great. And just having the breadth of whether it be candy, whether it be sneakers, whether it be, ending gun violence in America, which I did not do at all, but, maybe put the tiniest dent in, hopefully. I would at least like to tell myself that, because it makes me feel important. It makes my creative briefs feel powerful. I just have had such a like interesting, I guess, variety of experiences strategically, and then within the last few months, I have found myself at FCB New York in the hallowed halls, working namely with Michelob Ultra and a number of other Anheuser-Busch InBev brands.
Cool.
So yeah, the world of strategy is a big one, but nonetheless, the lessons that you learn, you take with you through every client, every brief, and yeah, every great campaign you get to work on.
Yeah, cool. That's a really interesting mix of categories and brands that you're working on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I want to dig a little bit more into what you talked about, kind of working in music while you were in Chicago, or before you started agency life. And you alluded to a record label, internship, and that stuff. And it's not just a record label, right? But tell us a little bit about the writing you were doing and then your work on the label.
Sure. So I went to college right outside of Chicago, and I just really luckily found myself there at a moment when a number of Chicago rappers just began to truly enter the cultural zeitgeist and kind of help to redefine the sound of, I guess, like modern rap music. Unfortunately, that's not Kanye West. It was a couple years later.
Yeah.
We can get to Kanye West in a little bit and how he's informed my path. But when I was in college, I was there at a time when Chance the Rapper was blowing up, Vic Mensa was blowing up, Saba, Alex Wiley. I'm trying to think of some other folks. No Name, who is sort of, I guess, maybe more on like an R&B side, or like, more enmeshed in that world, but also maybe more aggressive rap music, let's call it, like drill music, like Chief Keef, like Fredo Santana, Lil Durk. And to be in this just incredibly lively music scene at a moment that felt so unpredictable and exciting and nascent. I had never really done anything legitimate in the music space before. I had only been an angsty teenager writing music in my bedroom and like reading hip hop blogs. So to be able to just kind of go to shows and meet these people outside and just like talk with them, and for them also to just like accept me, the doofus that I was, and granted me a couple minutes of their time just to talk about their craft and the incredible music they were making. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I was a kid in a candy store, and so I continued with that, namely writing for like my school's sort of like music and arts publication about my experiences in that scene. And then I just somehow, really luckily, I guess, parlayed that into an internship at Def Jam. Working, yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm incredibly thankful for that experience, and that is the record label that I alluded to earlier that actually taught me that I did not want to work in music. But I'm glad. I wouldn't have wanted to have had that experience anywhere else, let's say. And so I went into Def Jam feeling real confident and cocky about my sort of, I guess, like foresight or understanding of like what was going on in hip hop, and where the genre was headed and where labels should be spending their money. And so I interned for their A&R department for a summer, and I am forever grateful to an A&R named Sycamore, who to this day is still legendary. I mean, he works with the likes of Travis Scott, with Miguel, with Jeremiah, with probably people who are even bigger than any of those names. But just to name a few. And he, I guess, he gave me a summer-long project of, I guess, coming to him with a list of artists and producers that Def Jam should look into signing and I guess like collaborating with more. And it was a pretty open-ended assignment. He's just like, hey, tell me what you think is cool at the end of the summer and we'll see if it works. Right. And I mean, as a young person who was just like happy to be there and, just used to being, I guess, just a, kind of a goofy goober in a room of like people who like really knew their stuff. I was very intimidated. And I spent the summer very just nervously and feverishly, digging into the depths of SoundCloud and just the blogosphere at the time. And at the end of that summer, I finally have my big meeting with Sycamore where, I come to him with my list and I'm like, my hands are shaking. And we're in this room where it's literally 2 chairs. This is an empty, huge office with 2 chairs and like a large, like really tall speaker. And I mean, it just felt so climactic, let's say, or there was gravity to the moment. And I plug in my iPod and I play him all these artists who I had researched, quite in depth, I guess, and thought to myself like, oh, well, this guy sort of fits this niche, or I guess, resonates with this type of audience that I know that Def Jam is chasing. So, from just a marketing standpoint or a, let's call it product standpoint, like right. this feels like it has the makings of a really cool, I guess, partnership between this rapper and the label. So thinking of it in very abstract marketing terms, right. Which I learned in the context of music, not the right approach. A far less like visceral and like human oriented approach, which I can, elaborate on in a minute. He sees me playing the music, or I play the music, and we're just sitting across from each other. And he just is sitting there just completely still, completely deadpan. And I'm shaking in my boots. And I finally work up the courage to ask him, like, hey, is there something wrong? Like, do you not like these artists? And he pulls a jujitsu move and says, you don't like the artists. And I was, just blown away by that. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, in order to work in this industry, you need to be willing to take a bullet for these artists that you believe in their vision so much. You're going to be with these people day in and day out throughout their creative process, and you need to understand what their intentions are in terms of being able to bring that to life for millions of people to see. And I think I thought of it too much as a maybe data centric or, maybe quant heavy marketer who just like completely lost the human element and didn't even think about it from the perspective of like the person sitting, on the subway listening with their headphones. I just saw it all in graphs and charts, and I learned a valuable lesson about the importance of like the human element in marketing and consumer insights. And nonetheless, had that experience, was a little demoralized after I realized, okay, maybe this music thing is not for me, at least professionally. And so then goes on. I then go on to, I guess, take those college classes and go to BBDO, and then now I'm here.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating story, right? First of all, to have the humility. I mean, I couldn't imagine what it'd be like to be in that room. I mean, and then and then when you walk out of that room, what that feels like. So first of all, the humility. But what's really impressive to me is how you sort of were able to take the lumps and then transition that to, hey, this is what I really want to do, right? And I know, having read some of your stuff on Medium, you shared some great lessons from what you learned in music. Is there anything else that you would share or you have learned that you have applied to your professional agency?
Yeah, I would say probably the most powerful lesson, and something that I kind of hold true still, ironically, also as I'm writing music that I've learned from advertising, they almost feed into each other, is the importance of emotion. And whether that's, of course, like understanding emotion from a neuroscientific standpoint, but if I go back to my Def Jam example, understanding it from just like the human experience standpoint, you, and any marketer needs to understand what type of emotional reaction they are looking to elicit from their audience, like at the most, I guess, visceral and simple level. And I think with music, and namely, I've talked about rap, I guess, but I will also speak to sort of loud, angry punk rock, which is, I would say now even more so the love of my musical life. And in that article and just in general, I've really drawn a lot of inspiration from punk because that music is so visceral. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It makes you want to, do a front flip off of stage, even though you might break both of your legs. All that is to say, it makes you feel something, and good creative or good marketing should do the exact same thing. And so I think understanding what are the quickest and most surefire ways of eliciting the reaction that you want to elicit, whether that be in a tagline, whether that be in a jingle, whether that be with your branding and sort of the visual elements of your brand. I think understanding how the person on the other side, how you want them to feel, is so important. And you could have all the graphs and charts in the world and all of the, I guess, like quant heavy stuff. But at the end of the day, if you don't know what you want somebody to feel, then your brand doesn't serve a purpose, or doesn't serve a clear one at the very least.
Right. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, because, as you know, I'm a market researcher by trade and training. And so are a lot of people who listen to this, but I've always enjoyed working with agencies, and particularly like the strategist role, the planner role, where you're kind of charged with making sense of all of these data sources, whether they be quantitative or qualitative. Somebody has to figure out what's important, what's not, and translate that into something that's meaningful for the brand. So, curious, from your perspective, sitting in that seat, what else do you see as important for understanding humans, consumers?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, the data that we will have, or the consumer data, and whether that be quant, qual, you name it, it's only going to get more granular and technologically mind-blowing. We're going to probably be able to like read people's minds at some point,
Not too far off, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure Elon Musk or somebody at Google has already did that like 10 years ago, and that's just in testing right now. But I think despite the granular, or as we get more granular data, I think we should not take for granted our understanding of the relationship that a brand has with its audience. And what I really mean by that is that like advertising in general used to be this like very sort of top down thing, right?
Right.
Where it's like you as brand advertise to the consumer and you're kind of talking at them being like, hey, buy our beer, buy our sneakers. It's really cool. And you were kind of the boss in that situation, and the consumer was just kind of getting it chucked at them, and they then had to decide accordingly.
Right.
But because of the way in which I guess the internet has like democratized information, and also just the fact that we need to compete more than ever for eyeballs and for attention and for relevance with people today, we are more beholden than ever to our audience and to their wants and needs, and to making them feel maybe not just cared for, because I feel like that's a little congratulatory as a brand. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
people like, I feel so cared for by Michelob Ultra, you know. Maybe it's not as deep as that, but I think people at the very least are tired of being advertised to or talked at in this very top down hierarchical way. And I think understanding the relationship where the consumer is the boss, and I know I'm stealing what you said in our last iteration of this interview, you know, from a Jim Stengel quote, but the consumer really is the boss. And so putting them more in the driver's seat of the brand, and what I mean by that is like what the brand actually puts out into the world, whether it be bringing your audience into the creative process for like the ads that you create and the content you create, having your audience like develop products itself. So I know for a fact that like Aerie and American Eagle, they bring in like sort of Gen Z, like they have like a Gen Z council of like younger people who help to inform product innovation. They help to inform the type of cause-oriented and I guess like activist or activism-oriented work that the brand does. I guess almost democratizing the brand to have your audience feel like they are at the table with you. I think just brings a completely new understanding of your audience. And I think it subverts that old idea of marketing that I think is just like so dead and will not get anybody anywhere anytime soon. So you could have all the data in the world, but I think it's understanding how you interact with your audience, how you want to make them feel, and the kind of agency that you want to give them with your brand. I think that is sort of where consumer understanding is headed.
Yeah, cool. No, I love that. It's actually, if I think of myself as a consumer, which of course I am, that feels like a nicer world, right? So I'm engaging with brands rather than just being talked to, where I just have to listen to the messages and choose which one sounds best. You know, you actually have some sort of stake in it with the brands that you buy. So cool stuff. Awesome. Excellent. All right, so this is a podcast, right? So I know you're a media guy, right? You consume tons of media. So what other podcasts, blogs, whatever kind of media you care to mention, do you turn to for insight, enjoyment, frustration, whatever?
Yeah, there's a nice potpourri of enjoyment and frustration. I think as you know, any advertising person or any, I don't know, hipster doofus who lives in Brooklyn, you know, I read I don't know why I'm calling the New York Times now a hipster publication. You know, just break that from the record.
Almost for the gray old lady, right? So
that's true. You know what? Shout outs to the gray old lady. If you're listening to this podcast, just unhear what I just said. Yeah, I guess just from a sheer sort of like news standpoint, I'm an avid New York Times reader. Maybe to the point where it's like not so great for my spirit every morning when I'm like refreshing it and, you know, reading about the world burning in 20 different ways.
What happened in the last 3 minutes? I need to know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You know, you got to balance it out. So to frustrate myself and, you know, just be reminded of the dystopia that we live in, I read the New York Times. I read the Wall Street Journal. I read Politico. You know, I'm sure we could add a bunch of other, you know, news sources that get bumped on my Apple News feed to me. But when I'm not trying to upset myself, I listen to probably maybe slightly more goofy or I guess lighthearted stuff. I listen to a lot of podcasts that are sort of like internet culture, kind of like Twitter humor mixed with maybe like menswear and fashion and streetwear a little bit, as well as maybe like politics. It's this weird kind of ecosystem of podcasters who all go on each other's podcasts.
Yeah.
I would say, I alluded to the fact earlier that I used to work on Reebok, and I'm a big like menswear person, and I got into streetwear through rap music, and so I've always been, I guess, like let's say I'm gonna say the words sartorially inclined, because one of the podcast hosts, his Instagram handle is sartorially inclined. So shout outs to Lawrence Schlossman. You're not the only elite podcaster now that I'm on the podcast. Nonetheless, the podcast is called Throwing Fits. It's two guys who used to work at Complex Media who are hilarious, who sort of tap into what they describe as like the millennial male zeitgeist, whether that be from clothing to stand-up comedy to music to sort of any other kind of like pop culture stuff. I love Yeah, But Still, which is maybe a little bit more comedy oriented, just very goofy internet humor type of stuff, as well as How Long Gone, which is more of that sort of like cultural commentary kind of stuff. And then if I want to feel smart or pretend that I'm smart while I'm drinking my coffee in the morning, I will listen to the Ezra Klein Show. And I will pat myself on the back for being a smart guy for, an hour.
Awesome. Super cool. All right. So there's some interesting stuff in there. Good. So now I'm going to get to the question that I really, really want to know, but I have to circle back. God, I just said circle back. I can't believe it.
Oh, yeah. No office jargon on this pod.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So I'm going to return to Def Jam, right? Because Def Jam is known, as a rap and hip hop label predominantly. However, in collaboration with Russ Rubin, they put together the legendary Slayer Rain and Blood, which is the apex of metal, period. So don't let that color your answer to this question, right? So, Michael, you're stranded on a desert island, right? You have 3 records at your disposal of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are those records?
Well, now you have me looking back on my time at Def Jam, and I'm realizing that had I gone to that A&R guy in our meeting and said, "Hey, I'm really passionate about thrash metal. I think Def Jam should put out another like Slayer-esque record," I think he would have said, "Hey, you care about this artist? Let's do it." And
there you go.
I wouldn't be here today. So
you'd be a legend. You'd be a legend.
I would be, but I wouldn't be, enjoying myself in the lovely world of advertising and consumer. So who knows? But nonetheless, shout outs to Slayer. I will listen to Rain and Blood later today. I will start my list with an album that came out about 2 months ago by a hardcore punk band called Turnstile. The album is called Glow On. And for those folks who tell themselves, "Hey, I don't want to listen to hardcore punk. That's just people yelling and, that's music to be angry to." I would implore you and challenge you, if anything, to listen to this album, because they transcend the genre. They introduce incredibly weird and bizarre sonic elements. There are moments where you'll be thinking to yourself, "Wow, this sounds like Rage Against the Machine. This sounds like 311, but this also sounds like Blink-182. This also sounds like Slayer." And so it is a lovely mishmash of incredible sounds that have just coated my eardrums for the last 2 months. And they are my favorite band in the entire world. And if you dare say a bad word about them, I will find you.
Hey, where are they from, by the way? Turnstile.
They are from Baltimore, the home of many lovely hardcore bands. Shout outs to the Baltimore scene.
All right.
But I will go from Baltimore to the UK for my next album, which is the classic Arctic Monkeys album, or maybe some people think of their first album as their classic. I tend to like the second one a little bit more, Godfather style, I guess. Arctic Monkeys' Favorite Worst Nightmare, incredible album. That was sort of, for me, just a beautiful moment of like, kind of that world of indie blowing up in the early 2000s. And I think just as a musician, the Arctic Monkeys were so integral to my understanding of melody and like I guess even just dynamic songwriting. And
Sure.
so I love that album, and I still listen to it all the time and just am blown away constantly.
Cool.
And then I promised earlier that I would get back to Kanye West, because at the end of the day, I mean, where would we be without Kanye West?
Yep.
Though I am not a fan of him as much anymore. Sorry, Kanye. His his album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, is an all-time classic, is probably the GOAT. It is hanging in my bedroom, at least the vinyl is. And I mean, talk about just a sonic, I don't even know what, just one of the most like ridiculous experiences you can have is listening to that album front to back. The ranging from like the production to like the lyricism, the collabs are incredible. I mean, just like Nicki Minaj's verse on Monster is to be remembered forever. I now realize I don't want to co-sign Nicki Minaj, given her recent Twitter claims. Go get vaccinated, folks. But all of that is to say, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is a phenomenal album that even if you are ashamed of Kanye West like I am today, you can still go back to this older album and be blown away by the breadth of sound, just an incredible work that he put together. And it was quite a moment in time. So yeah, those are my long-winded 3 favorite albums.
No, that's really cool. I'm actually surprised this is over 50 episodes now of the podcast, and it's the first Kanye West mention. So if you think I've got 150 plus mentions, first one Kanye West. So it's about time that he got a shout out. So thanks for that. No Slayer this time around, but you mentioned you're gonna put in some Rain and Blood later today. So we can talk tomorrow and see if you update that list. So
absolutely, I might even go with Hell Awaits as well.
Now you are really talking, man.
Oh, come on,
you're really talking. All right, excellent. All right, Michael, this has been so much fun. Really appreciate it. Looks like you got some light coming in the window there, so it's a good time to say, hey, I'm really glad we connected. Definitely want to stay in touch. Love your story, and yeah, rock and roll.